Communicating. We've been doing it in one way or another since the day we were born. On average, we spend about 80% of our time listening and talking. With so much practice, you'd think we'd be experts. Yet clear communication between individuals is something that we all have to work at. The payoff, however, is well worth the effort. Being able to communicate clearly ranks almost as high as basic job competency as a critical factor for success in the workplace. Moreover, for industrial workers, communication that is clear, complete, and accurate is essential. When you're working with hazardous substances, powerful equipment, or critical processes, a simple miscommunication can have serious consequences. One-to-one oral communication is a dynamic process that involves 4 key elements: the sender, or the person who is speaking, the message, or the thought that is transmitted by the speaker, the receiver, or the person who is receiving the message, and feedback, which is the response to the message. In theory, the communication process is a simple loop in which information is transmitted between the sender and the receiver. In practice, however, the communication process can be derailed by problems associated with any one of its 4 elements. Most commonly, communication is thrown off track by barriers that are associated with the way we listen. Many barriers to effective listening are internal. That is, they are personal attitudes or feelings that keep us from listening effectively. Personal filters are one major type of internal barrier to effective listening. In much the same way that different filters affect how a camera lens sees the world before it, we too view the world through filters. Although we may not be aware of it, these filters affect our perceptions and can keep us from listening effectively. Some of the filters that most strongly affect how we listen include our values, attitudes, interests, expectations, biases, assumptions, and personal experiences. Our emotions also strongly affect our ability to listen. It's not easy to listen to words or subjects that we find emotionally charged. When these hot buttons are pressed, our feelings may run so high that we can't rationally take in what's being said. In certain situations, our emotions can lead us to hear what we want or expect to hear, rather than what's actually said.
I know we got to make up for the ground we lost last week when the line was down, but my people just can't handle any more overtime.
They won't have to.
I know what you're going to say. I know we got to make the delivery date, and I know the work has to get out. But my people have been overloaded for weeks, and it's just not safe to have them work in there.
It's okay. I said your crew won't have to work more overtime. Third shift will be able to pick up the extra work on your line.
Oh.
Other barriers to effective listening are caused by external factors. Some examples are loud noises, an environment that's uncomfortably hot or cold, phone calls and other interruptions, and deadlines and time pressures. Your ability to listen can also be impaired if you are physically tired or ill, or if you're doing other things while you try to listen to someone.
We're talking 25% or more to justify.
It's also difficult to listen effectively if the speaker's voice is too soft or too loud, if the speaker has a distracting appearance or mannerisms, or if there's a discrepancy between what the speaker says and the message that's sent by his or her tone of voice, facial expression, or other types of nonverbal communication. In any case, you need to be aware that whether they're internal or external, barriers to effective listening can seriously interfere with the communication process.
What's up now? It can't be good.
Hi, Chris. I need to go over these schedule changes. Have a seat. you okay?
No, I'm fine.
Well, you sure sound awful. Anyway, as you see, like what we... The heck? Wow. Where were we?
Schedule changes.
Right. I just got word from marketing that... 1 minute. Hello? Jack! How's it going? Is that right? Sure. Sure. We can do that. Okay, back to business. Jeez, the time. I gotta wrap this up before the status meeting.
The purpose of the oral communication process is to transmit meaning between people. In this process, the listener is the person who hears and decodes the message and assigns meaning to it. So, regardless of what the speaker intended, the listener is the person who determines the final message that's received. By making an active effort to interpret the sender's message accurately, the listener can increase the likelihood of clear communication. This, in turn, helps build a cooperative, productive relationship between the speaker and the listener. Consequently, active listening may be the single most important element in the communication process. Active listening involves listening not only to a speaker's words, but also to the meanings behind the words, listening between the sentences, so to speak. Active listening enables you to take in thoughts and feelings that a speaker has, but is not expressing with words. These nonverbal components can help you define the true meaning of the speaker's message. So, what exactly does it take to be an active listener? Let's look at some of the essential characteristics. Active listeners give the speaker their complete attention and become personally involved with what they hear. As they listen, they put what they hear together with what they already know, and they don't risk missing important details by letting their minds wander. Active listeners stay mentally alert by interacting with the speaker. They ask appropriate questions to make sure that they're interpreting the message correctly.
So you're saying we can't repair the unit until you get the replacement part, but the part's already on order and we should get it by tomorrow morning?
Not exactly. I said I can get the replacement part sent overnight, but I haven't actually ordered it yet. I wanted to check with you first.
Active listeners keep their minds open to the message that's being sent. They hear the speaker out before they make a response or form an opinion.
Well, we're trying to improve that.
Active listeners don't, however, become so intent on hearing every word that they lose sight of the larger meaning of what is being said. They look for the organization of the message and search out the main ideas and themes. This helps them grasp the essence of what the speaker is trying to communicate. In short, active listeners focus on the speaker's ideas, and they use their own feelings and intuition to help them take in the intent as well as the content of the speaker's message.
And this way we'll be able to bring the new unit online ahead of schedule.
Okay, but what you're saying is we'll still have the old units to use for backup, right?
For the first month or two, just until the new unit is broken in and everybody's up to speed on the operating procedures.
Sounds like the same old story to me. Everything's production, production, production. I tell you one thing, it's going to be a maintenance nightmare. You know, the same thing happened back at the Silt River plant back in '86.
Because listening is such a critical part of the communication process, it pays to spend time improving your listening skills. There are a number of ways to do this. One important thing you can do is ask questions and find out what the speaker knows. Openly express your interest and be attentive.
Problem was, and it was that old filtering system. Now we've switched over to the new filter elements.
Oh, that's right. How's that working out?
Well, pretty good. We've been sending samples over to the lab every day, and levels are back down where they should be. And, well, the Final Cut's testing right on spec.
Well, that's great.
Focus on ideas. As you listen to someone, pick out the ideas that he or she is presenting. Try to picture in your mind the story or examples that you're hearing. Sort out facts and evidence from opinions and assumptions.
And so then we switched over to the new filter elements. And we've been sending samples over to the lab every day, and the levels are back down where they should be. The Final Cut's been testing right on spec.
Now, as far as your feedback, obviously, I
Resist external distractions. Concentrate on the speaker's face and words, but ignore the speaker's mannerisms and personality if they are distracting. Hold your response until the speaker is finished. Resist interrupting with rebuttals, advice, or judgments. Keep an open mind. Ask questions to clarify issues if you need to. Also, be aware that when you strongly disagree with someone, you're more likely to tune out what he or she says. So, if you disagree with a speaker, make a conscious effort to give the speaker more, not less, of your attention. Capitalize on the speed of thought. People process language at about 300 to 500 words per minute, but they talk at about 200 words per minute. Use this time lag to mentally summarize the speaker's thoughts and feelings. Don't spend the time daydreaming or formulating your response. Analyze the nonverbal part of the communication. Watch the speaker's facial expressions and body language for clues about how the speaker intends for the message to be received. Pay close attention to the speaker's tone of voice, which can express hidden feelings. Evaluate the message, not the speaker. Stay focused on the content and the meaning of the communication. Don't let how you feel about the speaker become a barrier to effective listening. Finally, treat the development of effective listening skills as a continuous improvement process. It's not always easy, and it's not a job that's ever really finished. But the rewards in terms of productive relationships and a safe, efficient workplace can be tremendous. How clearly you communicate when you're speaking depends not only on what you say, but also on what you communicate nonverbally, without using words. It's estimated that over 55% of any message is communicated nonverbally, through your tone of voice, facial expression, and body language. Using positive nonverbal signals and avoiding distracting mannerisms can boost your ability to get your message across. Tone of voice is an especially important means of nonverbal communication because it can be a powerful indicator of your feelings. Using a warm tone of voice, for instance, helps make your listeners feel comfortable and accepted, not threatened or defensive.
Sit down, Chuck. I just want to go over the latest production runs with you.
Also, speak in an appropriate pace, slowly enough so that listeners can follow what you're saying. Your facial expressions and the way in which you move your body can also have a dramatic effect on your listeners. For example, not maintaining eye contact with a listener or turning your back on him or her sends that person a strongly negative signal. Often, meaning is transmitted through groups of nonverbal signals that are used together. For instance, when used together, frowning, looking down, folding your arms, and leaning back form a closed posture that typically indicates non-acceptance of the other person or the message that's being sent. On the other hand, making eye contact, smiling, leaning forward in a relaxed posture with open hands and arms, and directly facing the listener are a group of nonverbal signals that form an open posture. Taken together, they typically indicate sincere interest, respect, and empathy, or understanding of the other person's feelings and point of view. One more fundamental point to keep in mind about nonverbal communication is that it should send the same message as the words that you are speaking. When a person says one thing, but his or her tone of voice and body language communicate something quite different, People instinctively find it hard to trust that person because they sense that something about the individual is out of sync, and a lack of trust can kill any chance of effective communication.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. Certainly given it a lot of thought, and we're always looking for ways to reduce waste. Of course, I'd have to see some hard numbers on the time and cost involved. Get some hard data together, and we'll talk sometime next week.
To get your message across clearly, make sure that what you say and what you do work together to convey the meaning that you want your listeners to receive.
That sounds like a good idea. You've certainly done your homework. We're always looking for ways to reduce waste. Of course, I need some hard numbers on the time and cost involved. So why don't you pull your data together and we'll talk later this week.
Okay.
All right.
Each of us speaks through a vast web of personal communication filters that affect how we perceive and interpret the world around us. Our personal filters are influenced by our culture, our family, and our life experiences. Different filters or ways of looking at things are often at the root of communication problems. Values are one common type of filter that we all have. Our values are what we hold to be true about such things as other people, ethics, rules, authority, and so on. Differing values can produce violent clashes between people, since both parties are upholding what they believe to be right. Attitudes are how we look at the world, what we feel is good or bad about ourselves and our surroundings. Assumptions are what we accept without question as true about ourselves, others, and the world in general. What we say is based on our assumptions of reality. Expectations are what we foresee in our own lives, including how we assume others will behave. Positive or negative expectations have a profound effect on how we speak to other people. Personal experience is another filter that strongly affects how we communicate. It's only natural that we speak from our own experience. It forms our frame of reference. But experience can be a two-edged sword. In some situations, it can promote better communication. In others, it can be a communication barrier. Sharing similar experiences can create understanding between people and promote better communication.
The procedure for taking this unit offline is just like the procedure that we used for the old system.
Well, I guess we both know that drill.
But we need to keep in mind that what we've experienced may or may not be true for other people. Blindly generalizing that what has happened to us must be true for everybody else can distort our view of reality and lead to miscommunication.
So I was talking with representatives.
We also build positive and negative expectations based on what has happened in the past. This may or may not be helpful on the job. Using past experience to help you avoid problems in the future is generally a wise move. But letting feelings from a past experience harden into a bias or prejudice is counterproductive. People are often unaware of their biases and prejudices. Yet it is these types of filters that cause us to unthinkingly make judgmental statements because we are seeing through a distorted lens. Different interests can also bias our communication with others, creating a vast gulf in one person's understanding of another. For instance, a production foreman, a plant manager, and a maintenance supervisor may see an issue from very different points of view because their primary interests are not exactly the same. Semantics, or the meaning of words, can also cause confusion and misunderstanding. Words may mean different things to different people.
Now, this may be...
Some of the most difficult filters to overcome involve communicating with people from other cultures or from different job functions, such as union versus management, maintenance versus production, or engineering versus operations. In these kinds of situations, the two sides may have widely different filters. so it's no surprise that gaps in understanding easily occur. In such cases, the core problem is that our perception of the message is influenced by how we view the person or the group that the person represents.
That's just what I expect from accounting. Excuses about why it's not cost effective. I'd like to see them operate the unit with that old control system.
And so obviously,
When we talk with other people, a lot of misinterpretations and arguments can be avoided if we just keep our thinking straight. Focus on facts, evidence, and specifics, rather than opinions, assumptions, and generalizations. A biased generalization based on a single incident increases distortion and misinterpretation.
I think we should scrap the co-op program. It's too expensive, and those kids from Laveau Tech School are so irresponsible. We had one last year, never could get in on time, was always leaving early. It was so much more trouble than it was worth.
To reduce generalizations and subjectivity from your speech patterns, ask yourself, how much? How often? When? Where? Compared to what? As for opinions and assumptions, they have their place in interpersonal communication as long as they're acknowledged for what they are. Expressing your opinions can be a helpful form of self-disclosure that lets people know where you stand on specific issues. Stating exactly what your assumptions are can clear away the source of much confusion and conflict. But stating opinions or assumptions as facts tends to damage your credibility. Also, opinions stated as facts often lead to rebuttals. The conversation may then degenerate into an argument over who's right. Being direct, using facts and evidence, helps ensure clarity. Being able to describe exactly what you mean also helps establish your credibility.
all right, well, the facts are that the intern who worked for Pat's crew last summer had a number of performance problems, whereas the 2 interns assigned to Bob's crew worked out fine. Now, as for the expense of the program, we need to get the current figures and analyze them to see where we really stand. But most of us here feel that we can make this co-op program a win-win situation, both for us and for the Votech students. So what I want to do here is divvy up the responsibility.
To be a good communicator, you should be direct and use facts, not generalizations and assumptions, to make your point. But how do you recognize statements of fact? What are the earmarks of assumptions? Statements of fact can be made only after evidence is obtained. They only concern issues that the evidence can support. They include numbers that are realistic and specific. They have a high degree of certainty. And they involve things we can observe or prove. Statements of assumption, however, are often made without any evidence or supporting facts. They go beyond what the evidence can support. They are statements of probability rather than certainty. They generalize numbers beyond reality. And they add subjective information to what can actually be observed or proved. The acid test for successful communication is whether or not your message has been understood and accepted by the listener as you intended. In industrial situations, distorted communication can result in costly inefficiencies, off-spec products, damaged equipment, even injured personnel. To improve the chances that your message will be received correctly, follow these helpful tips for speakers. Know what you want to say. Before you begin to speak, think through what you want to communicate and what you want to accomplish. Ask yourself what your objective is: to teach, to explain, to persuade, or to simply answer a question. Know as much as possible about the people who are receiving your message. Find out how much background they have on the subject that you're talking about. Don't make assumptions about what they do or don't know. Ask questions to find out. Tailor your communication to build on what they already know and to fill in any gaps in their knowledge. Convey information in specific terms. Choose words that explain your message in such a way that listeners will get the same mental picture that you have. When you give instructions, be specific. Clearly state who, what, when, where, why, and how much. Give listeners familiar examples that they can relate to. This keeps listeners interested, clarifies difficult concepts, and makes it easier for listeners to retain what they hear. Avoid fuzzy terms that are open to interpretation. For instance, instead of saying at regular intervals, say every 3 hours, if that's what you want listeners to know. Secure understanding. Be alert for any nonverbal cues that indicate your listeners are confused or that they're resistant to what you're saying. Speak in terms that they'll be able to understand. Don't talk over their heads or talk down to them. Aid retention. Associate new ideas with ideas that are already familiar to listeners. Ask questions to make sure that listeners understand what you've said. Periodically summarize your main points. Finally, encourage feedback. Remember that communication is a dynamic process that involves give and take between the speaker and the listener. At best, poor communication on the job creates confusion and frustration. At worst, it can result in rework, waste, costly downtime, and possibly injured personnel. Just as control systems use feedback to keep equipment and processes operating smoothly, you can use feedback techniques such as asking questions, paraphrasing, and summarizing to keep the communication process on track. The ability to ask good questions for feedback is crucial for clear communication. Questions used in this way are called clarification questions. Clarification questions are open-ended. They generally can't be answered with a simple yes or no. They often begin with what or how. For instance,
What effect do you think the revised operating procedures will have on plant efficiency?
How would you go about finding the source of the problem?
listeners can use clarification questions as a feedback technique to help speakers communicate more effectively. Let's look at some examples. When a speaker uses words or phrases that we aren't familiar with, or when a speaker seems to have a different meaning for a word than we do, we may have the urge to pretend that we understand. But pretending to understand may only increase the confusion, because it forces us to guess what the speaker really means. It's better simply to ask for an explanation.
What exactly do you mean by margin?
It's as if you could almost see McClellan.
When a speaker gets off track, a well-timed question can quickly bring the person back to the subject.
You said earlier that you wanted to go over how the revised regulation would affect our process unit. Would this be a good time to cover that?
One of the most common communication problems is generalizing, not speaking in specifics. Again, a clarification question can usually remedy this problem.
Okay, you're saying efficiency has improved, but we still have a ways to go. Can you explain specifically which areas have improved and which areas still need more work?
Unfocused speakers are likely to express contradictory opinions or facts. This is often the case in emotional situations. When faced with a need to check the accuracy of conflicting information, you should be careful to confront the contradiction without blaming the other person.
I thought a few minutes ago you said the entire system was down, and now I'm hearing you say that the pumps are just overheating. Is that right?
Well, yeah, the pumps are...
Another common communication problem involves personal feelings or opinions that someone is reluctant to share about an idea that's being discussed. To bring out resistance or check for negative feelings, ask a question that summarizes your understanding of the issue.
Do you agree that the new valves give more precise control, but you're concerned that the how much more maintenance might be required to keep them working properly. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct.
Asking clarification questions is a crucial aspect of good communication. If you don't ask the right questions, you may not get a completely clear message. Two other useful feedback techniques are paraphrasing and summarizing. Paraphrasing is restating or rephrasing the essence of the speaker's words and thoughts. It gives a condensed version of what the speaker said. The goal of paraphrasing is to feed back what has been said in such a way that it will lead to further discussion or insight on the topic. Here's an example.
I told her 100 times to wear her respirator when she was working over there, but she always had some excuse not to. Said it was too hot wearing it. Said the straps hurt her neck.
So even though you warned her repeatedly, she wouldn't wear her respirator because it was uncomfortable.
Paraphrasing has a number of purposes. It encourages the speaker to provide more detail about the content of the message and clarify it if necessary. It lets the speaker know you have understood the message. And it helps the speaker focus on a specific situation, idea, or action. You can also ask a speaker to paraphrase a previous statement that he or she has made. This can help you confirm that you heard the speaker's original statement correctly.
Just so that I'm getting this right, would you say that again for me in plain English?
Summarizing is another effective feedback technique. It involves condensing the speaker's message by using a collection of several paraphrase responses. The goal of summarizing is to make sure that you accurately understand all of what the speaker has said. Summarizing accomplishes several purposes. It allows the speaker to add new information that he or she may have forgotten. It allows the listener to bring the conversation back into focus if it has gotten off the subject. It ties different parts of the message together and allows themes or patterns to appear. It can also be used to review progress and suggest areas for future discussion.
So, let's see what all we've covered here. You think I ought to have gotten involved earlier. Everything's back on track now. And maybe we should start including a representative from shipping in our weekly production meetings.
Using feedback is a critical part of interpersonal communication. Being able to ask clarification questions, paraphrase statements, and summarize the messages that you hear can help you keep the communication process on track and ensure that you get complete and accurate information.
I don't know what the problem is. I'm having a lot of trouble getting the monthly production reports completed. Some of the units are sending me their information late all the time. Others are sending me information that's either outdated or incorrect. And then when I call the unit supervisors to tell them about the problem, they're never there, and they don't return my phone calls.
So you're finding it hard to get the monthly production reports done because you're getting late or incorrect information from the units, and you're not able to discuss the problems with the unit supervisors.
Receiving feedback lets you see yourself as others see you. This can be an important part of your personal development because it helps you improve on your weaknesses and build on your strengths. It also enables you to determine another person's understanding of a situation, so you can make adjustments to get things back on track if there's a problem. Taking the initiative and asking for feedback is generally a good habit to get into. When you sincerely request feedback, you're automatically putting yourself in a frame of mind that prepares you to receive constructive criticism. Still, the feedback you receive can sometimes be hard to swallow, especially when it concerns your personal behavior. Let's look at some ways to help you make the most of the feedback that you receive on the job. When you ask for feedback, be specific in describing the behavior or issue that you want feedback on.
I'd like some feedback about how we resolve the scheduling conflicts between production and shipping. What do you think worked well, and what can we do differently in the future?
Use active listening techniques to make sure that you hear the feedback accurately. These techniques include keeping an open mind, asking clarification questions, listening for the larger meaning, sorting out opinions from facts and evidence, paying attention to the nonverbal parts of the communication, and evaluating the message, not the speaker. Keep in mind that personal filters can cause your perception of a message to be different from the way that another person perceives it. To help you determine if filters are affecting what you're hearing, ask the other person to share his or her perspective.
From a management perspective, we've got to keep overtime down in order to remain competitive. But how does it look to you as far as the production line is concerned?
Well,
Using feedback techniques, such as clarification questions, paraphrasing, and summarizing, are also good ways to help you be certain that your understanding of a message is accurate. Managing your emotions is critical for effective communication when you're giving or receiving feedback, but it can be particularly difficult to do when you're on the receiving end. Hold on now. When feedback touches on your personal behavior, try not to become defensive or rationalize the behavior that's being discussed. Don't let your emotions make you tune out the speaker. Work even harder to be an active listener. It's surprising what you can learn if you manage to keep your emotions in check.
But how do I do that? Am I supposed to sit quietly and act as if I don't feel a thing?
No, it's not productive to suppress your emotions, but you do have to be aware of them so you can make the choice to act rationally. When your emotions are aroused by negative feedback, you may begin to view the conversation as an argument. This can cause you to waste valuable listening time plotting your rebuttal in an attempt to win your point. Instead, summarize your understanding of the feedback that you've been given and share what you feel. Reporting your emotions lets the person who's giving you feedback know how his or her message is being received. It also ensures that your response is understood and believed, because it helps keep your words consistent with what you're communicating nonverbally.
So, let's see what all we've covered here. You think I ought to have gotten involved earlier. Everything's back on track now. And maybe we should start including a representative from shipping in our weekly production meetings.
that about covers it.
Well, I appreciate the feedback, but I feel concerned about your saying that I should have stepped in earlier. How soon do you think that I should have gotten involved?
Feedback is an invaluable tool for developing your communication skills and building productive relationships with other people. So make a habit of asking for and carefully listening to feedback. Then act on the information that you receive. Just like other aspects of the communication process, receiving feedback takes work, but it gets easier with practice, and the benefits that it offers are well worth your effort.
I told her 100 times to wear her respirator when she was working over there, but she always had some excuse not to. Said it was too hot wearing it. Said the straps hurt her neck.
So even though you warned her repeatedly, she wouldn't wear her respirator because it was uncomfortable.
So, let's see what all we've covered here. You think I ought to have gotten involved earlier. Everything's back on track now. And maybe we should start including a representative from shipping in our weekly production meetings.
What's up now? It can't be good.
Hi, Chris. I need to go over these schedule changes. Have a seat. Are you okay?
No, I'm fine.
Well, you sure sound awful. Anyway, as you see, like what we... The heck? Wow. Where were we?
Schedule changes.
Right. I just got word from marketing that... One minute. Hello? Jack! How's it going? Is that right? Sure. Sure. We can do that. Okay, back to business. Jeez, the time. I gotta wrap this up before the status meeting.